Hello, today I'll discuss how U.S. officials often speak the truth once they leave office. The former U.S. ambassador to China has fiercely criticized Trump for underestimating China. Meanwhile, chaos in the U.S. has turned into a political dogfight. Governors are suing the president, and the president is going after governors. On June 9th, Premier He Feng met with U.S. Treasury Secretary Bissender in London, UK, for the first meeting of the China-U.S. Economic and Trade Consultation Mechanism. The whole world is watching to see the outcome of this negotiation between the two largest economies to see if they can reach a consensus agreement. After more than 6 hours of talks on the first day, Trump said at the White House that so far, all the news he's received from London has been positive, but that China is not easy to deal with. However, the spotlight on the China-U.S. tariff negotiations was overshadowed by the riots in Los Angeles. The whole incident happened on June 6 when U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, along with several federal agencies under the Department of Homeland Security, launched an unprecedentedly large-scale anti-immigration enforcement operation in Los Angeles, making a show of it. The operation sparked a huge reaction, with hundreds of protesters starting to gather at the federal building in downtown Los Angeles, demanding that ICE release the detainees. The number of protesters quickly grew to over 1,000, triggering several days of riots, with the clashes escalating continuously. 2 days after riots broke out in Los Angeles, Trump bypassed the Democratic governor, Newsom, and deployed over 2,000 National Guard troops onto the streets of Los Angeles to suppress the unrest. The U.S. military also planned to deploy around 700 more Marines to Los Angeles. U.S. President Trump is showing the whole world how to use the toughest methods to crack down on riots, which has also led to fierce clashes with Newsom. The National Guard is basically a reserve military force, and these troops are usually under the control of the state government. However, Trump invoked an old law, the Insurrection Act, which was enacted back in 1807. The act gives the president the authority to federalize the National Guard when the country faces riots, insurrection, or serious obstruction of law enforcement. In this situation, the National Guard would no longer be under the command of the state governor, but would instead be directly commanded by the president as the commander-in-chief. Historically, this act was used by President Eisenhower in 1957 in Arkansas to ensure the enforcement of school desegregation policies. The California state government is pushing back strongly, and Governor Newsom has already demanded that the command of the National Guard, which was deployed without proper authorization, be returned to him. On June 9th, the California state government filed a lawsuit in court, requesting a ruling that President Trump's memorandum issued on June 7th and the U.S. Department of Defense's order to deploy the California National Guard to the Los Angeles area were illegal, exceeded the federal government's authority, and violated the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. The state also asked the court to revoke the related orders. California Attorney General Bonta said that Trump's actions were an attempt to create chaos and crisis locally for his own political purposes. Federalizing the California National Guard in this way is not only an abuse of presidential power, but also infringes on the state's rights granted by the Constitution, undermining the very foundation of the United States. Trump responded by saying that the California governor was letting cities be destroyed and that the events in Los Angeles could spark a rebellion. Trump said he did not want to start a civil war and that when it came to the National Guard issue, he had no other choice. He also said that they did the right thing and, if necessary, would deploy more National Guard troops. Trump went on to say that he would support the arrest of California Governor Newsom because 2 days earlier, White House Border Affairs Director Tom Homan had said that anyone obstructing immigration enforcement should be arrested, including Governor Newsom and Los Angeles Mayor Bass. Mnuchin responded to Tom Homan at the time, saying, "You're pulling me." When asked about Mnuchin's response, Trump responded, "If I were the director of border affairs in the White House, I would do this and pull him." In addition, on June 9th, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security said that Los Angeles Mayor Bass's claim that the situation in Los Angeles is calm is a complete lie. Why are these conflicts happening in California, USA, and why has the situation escalated? According to analysis by CCTV News, the chaos in Los Angeles highlights the deepening rift between the U.S. federal government and California. California is located in the southwestern part of the United States. It is the most populous state in the country and the third largest by area. For a long time, California has been a major stronghold for the Democratic Party, and as a Republican, Trump has failed to win California's votes in all three of his presidential campaigns. The trigger for this conflict was the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigrants. However, California has long relied on immigrants from all backgrounds to drive its economic development, so there is a tradition of protecting them. The conflict between the California state government and the anti-immigration federal government has continued to intensify. Since Trump took office as president again, the federal government in California have been clashing and confronting each other over a series of issues, including wildfire relief in Los Angeles, the so-called reciprocal tariff policy, and visas for foreign students. Just one day before the Los Angeles conflict broke out, CNN revealed that the Trump administration was instructing government agencies to study how to drastically cut or even terminate federal funding to California. In response, California Governor Newsom said that if the federal government does this, Californians will stop paying taxes to the federal government. The escalation of the conflict in California this time stems from the recent increased efforts by U.S. law enforcement to arrest immigrants, which has led to mass protests. So why has there been a ramp-up in arrests? Some inside information revealed by U.S. media suggests it is the result of pressure from the Trump administration. According to a CNN report on June 8, large-scale deportation of illegal immigrants is one of the main policies of the Trump administration. Last month, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller held a meeting with senior officials from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, demanding that the agency step up its enforcement efforts. In the days that followed, the agency intensified its enforcement actions against illegal immigrants. On June 4th alone, as many as 2,368 people were detained, breaking the previous record. In the first few months of this year, the average daily number of illegal immigrants arrested was only around 1,000. By June 6, the authorities carried out even more high-profile arrests in California, which eventually triggered riots. Professor Diao Daming from Renmin University of China, who specializes in international relations, gave a very good summary. He said that the root cause of the current conflict in Los Angeles, California, is probably the serious disagreement between the two parties over major immigration policies. The United States is a nation of immigrants, and immigration has indeed brought energy and new ideas to the country. This is the positive side. However, for the Trump administration and the conservative wing of the Republican Party it represents, the surge in immigration means that the status and influence of the white population will continue to decline in the future. This is a reality that conservatives who hold white supremacist views simply cannot accept. Therefore, on the major issue of immigration, which concerns the future direction of the United States, there are irreconcilable differences between the Democratic and Republican parties. So, the riots in California are essentially the result of political conflict between the two parties. Also, I want to mention that American officials only speak the truth after they leave office. On June 3rd, after completing his 3-year term, former U.S. Ambassador to China, Burns, gave an interview. After stepping down, this diplomat bluntly stated that Trump had made a fundamental mistake. This assessment not only reveals the flaws in Trump's policies, but also exposes the deeper contradictions within America's China strategy. Burns said that Trump's strategy of imposing tariffs on China had serious problems. When the U.S. wielded the tariff stick, it wasn't just aimed at China, but also at traditional allies like the EU, Japan, and South Korea. This indiscriminate approach caused the U.S. to lose the chance to unite its allies to counterbalance China. He emphasized that if the US, Europe, and Japan could form a united front, they would account for 60% of global GDP, which would be enough to put pressure on China in trade negotiations. However, Trump's policies forced allies to look for other partners, ultimately weakening America's global leadership. What worries Burns even more is the US misjudging China's resilience and determination. He said that Trump's team believed tariff pressure could force China to compromise, but China responded with reciprocal countermeasures, showing a tough stance. In the Burns interview, it was mentioned that China no longer looks up to the US, but instead sees itself as an equal competitor. Drawing on his 3 years of observation in China, he noted that China not only has a vast reserve of tech talent, but has also made significant breakthroughs in fields like artificial intelligence and quantum computing. Burns also said that American society's understanding of China is seriously lagging behind. He criticized both parties for still being stuck in the stereotype that China only steals technology, ignoring China's systematic rise in the tech sector. This cognitive bias not only leads to policy mistakes, but also makes the US pay a price diplomatically. He stated bluntly that China is already a competitor worthy of respect, and the US needs to re-examine its China policy. As for the future of China-US relations, Burns predicted that the two sides will eventually reach a trade agreement, but structural contradictions will still remain. He believes that competition between China and the US in areas like artificial intelligence, space exploration, and biotechnology will intensify further in the next decade, and this will have a profound impact on the global economy and geopolitics. He suggested that the US must stop its tough-on-the-surface China policy and should shift to a more rational and pragmatic approach, otherwise the cost of misjudging its opponent will be borne by the US itself. It can be summed up like this. First, Burns' candid remarks upon leaving office serve as a wake-up call for the US. Second, the US-China policy shouldn't just stay tough on the surface. It should actually seek to find a balance in China-US relations through a deeper understanding of China's strengths and intentions. How China and the US get along in the future doesn't just affect the fate of both countries, but will also profoundly impact the global landscape. But will Trump actually listen to these honest words?